I suppose when we were starting this project, we were looking at the whole area of the heritage associated with this and the people involved in the church and in the associated with the community and the village itself, of course. But it transpired, one of the stories I suppose that came very prominent was the fact that this man here, Lucas Wade, he had a shop down in the village, and he was a very, very popular man, a very, very kind type of man, and he was the bell ringer here in the church. At that time, you find that the Protestant and the Catholic religions were very much apart in their thinking, and they didn't associate with one another very much at all. But he happened to be married to Mary Collins, and Mary Wade as she became, but she was a Catholic, one of the local Catholics from Enoch outside. And when Lucas died, she was still alive, but the tradition was that no Catholic could come inside the gates of the Protestant graveyard of the church, and even herself wasn't allowed in at the time of his burial. But there was a wall along here, right along here, so the local people that came to pay their respects, even his wife, stood along by the wall on the outside. Even from the Catholic point of view, anybody that would have entered into the church or the graveyard would have to go to the bishop to go to confession, to get their sin forgiven. Well, basically the church, after being closed down as a functioning church since 1964, I suppose the community were concerned that it would fall into too much disrepair and it end up as a sort of a derelict building. And we didn't need a derelict building so close to the street. When we took on the building and we looked at I suppose, the amount of stories and the amount of history associated with it, we found that the building itself had been, I suppose, in a way it was vandalised inside. You know, you had the pews that was removed, you had the altar part was removed, and I know that people have told us they have seen those. You know, when after the building closed, they were able to look through the windows, and it was a lovely building. But over the years, it sort of got vandalised, and unfortunately, when we took it over, there was very, very little left. You know. The Protestant people have sort of died off, the local Protestants have died off, and the Catholics are left, and there's very little memories associated with the inside of the building. We've heard from people that have visited us since. They remember at one stage where there was a wedding here, but of course the locals wouldn't have remembered that because it was going back quite a few years, and they wouldn't have been associated with the involvement with it anyway. Well, I suppose in 2007, going back to my own situation and when we started, that I became redundant from the job I was in, and I seen this as an opportunity because I felt so passionate. I know that other people felt so passionate about this building. It was one opportunity that I had to start the process of restoring the building. But we had to put a lot of time and a lot of resources into it. You know, we spent, I suppose, 4 to 5 years really sort of getting down to the nitty-gritty of how to, and organising who had to do what, where the funding was going to come from, and working on each aspect, I suppose, of the restoration. You know, and once you started, there was no going back, because in a project like this, or in any project, once you're into the first 20% of the process, there's no going back really. You know. We had a community of bats and, of course, crows here before we moved in, before we acquired the building. And during that process, we had to put in a policy of preservation for the bats. It ended up we have 4 species of bats here in the church. Now, the reason that we built this unit here, firstly because of the safety involved in people using the area, but secondly then is to ensure that the lesser horseshoe bat can get into into the crypt, which is underneath there. Now their nature is that they'll fly along by the perimeter, the fencing, and they'll actually fly at this height. So we had to raise it to this height to make sure that we accommodated those bats. This is the home of the purple-billed bats. We have 2 species of bats up there, and we had the part of conservation is there that we put into conservation breeding boxes in there so that they can access through the louver windows that we purposely installed for the conservation of those, so they could survive and they could breed and continue.